Cool. That's what I want. All right, team. Can everybody please listen up? This is applying to everybody. So can we get our headphones out of our ears? Put our screens to 45. I don't want you guys multitasking when I'm giving you guys these instructions. Not these instructions, this bit of information. Cool. So where do I want to start? Okay. Something that I forgot to explain to some of you guys is I've given you guys some past exam questions, but I keep forgetting to tell you how I want you to answer them. And so I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. If you haven't answered an exam question, this applies to the energy people and the not earth science, the astronomy people. You guys have been given some exam questions, and I want you to tackle them in a certain way. I want to explain the reasons behind my methods. You can understand the science of learning. It's also really important for you guys when you're trying to think about how do you study and how do you study well. So I want to share with you this model of memory and how memory works. So when your brain is inputting information, that's the external information. So that's coming from all your senses. And that's basically in your sensory memory. And that only lasts for a very short amount of time. It's basically just getting a sense of like, you're hearing my voice and your brain's currently processing it. It's not going to remember every single thing I say because it has a limited capacity of what's going to go into your brain. All right? Then a section of what I'm telling you, or a section of what you're getting from your sensory input is going into your working memory and you're actually thinking about it. Again, it has a limited capacity and there's only so many things you can remember. When they say like 7 plus or minus 2 items, it's like if I gave you guys a list of things to remember, like I gave you a list of animals to remember, you could probably remember up to 7, maybe 9. But the moment I go past 9, you're going to have a very hard time remembering all of the animals that I tell you. So if I give you 20 animals, you're going to struggle remembering 20 animals. That is what we call your working memory. Are we good with that so far? All right, so that is why I ask you guys, like right now, I said put your screens at 45, get your headphones out, because that way you have more capacity from your sensory memory to go into your working memory and pay attention. That's, again, why you also have to be mindful of when you're multitasking, because if you're multitasking, you're not giving everything your full attention, and thus, when I give you notes, you're not actually processing anything that I'm telling you, and then later you go, oh, I don't understand this. It's like, well, you weren't listening. And then the last part is your long-term memory. So these are things that are stored in your brain. They vary on how long you store them for. It could be a couple days, it could be years, but there's unlimited capacity to this. So for example, like I probably will remember the students that I saw yesterday or on Tuesday, because that's a couple days ago, and I can easily do the roll and be like, oh yeah, I saw Lady that day, I didn't see Lady that day. But if I waited 2 more weeks and then I tried to recall, did I see Lady on August 20th in class, I can't remember that. Does that make sense? Oh, cool, take a seat. So the reason why I want to bring this up is because we are currently on our external material, and that is an exam style test. So it's very different to the internals, which is just working on a project and it's open book. In this case, it is going to be closed book, and you have to retrieve stuff from your memory to answer these questions. So we need to have this information stored into your long-term memory in your brain. So that's what I need to teach you guys how to do over the next couple weeks before you do your exam. What is important when it comes to trying to retrieve our memory is something called retrieval practice, and that is how often you access that neural pathway. So something to remember when you guys are studying for exams is that cramming the night before isn't a good strategy because you're not actually practicing this pathway a lot. You're just doing it once and then you're hoping you still remember it. If you do shorter bursts of study more frequently, you're then accessing that pathway more often in your brain, and that's what's going to help it store in your brain better. So keep that in mind when you guys are studying for exams, is that you want to do like 20 minutes each day instead of 2 hours on a Sunday. Does that make sense? So the more you access it, the better it goes into your long-term memory. The other thing is, if you guys remember, I like you guys to do pre-learning before I give you guys notes, and that's because I want you guys to start building this pathway before I start teaching you. And the reason why is because when I actually give you the notes, you will have some prior knowledge in that, and that then means that you have you'd have to use less of your working memory to then access what I'm talking about. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Yep. So that is kind of the brain science to what we're doing and why we're doing it. So like I said, 2 benefits. So doing the pre-learning, always really important before I give you the notes. So that way, again, it reduces your working capacity so you can listen better and have more attention. And then every time you retrieve the information, it goes into your long-term memory. Okay? So let me talk about a method that I like to use when it comes to doing practice exam questions. Let's see if I have it on the next slide. There we go. So this is something that I developed at my previous school. I was given some time to work on this project, and I did some reading in the literature about how do we learn well. And one of the ways you learn well is by practicing the retrieval of the knowledge. So I've called it CPR, critical practice of retrieval. And every time you guys do an exam question, I want you to do it 3 times. And let me explain what I mean by 3 times. The first time you do an exam question, I want you guys to do it with no notes and just your brain and treat it like it's a real test. What this helps you do is it helps your brain identify what you already know and that's already stored in your long-term memory. I also want you guys to color code it. You don't have to use the color code that I'm using. You're welcome to do a different color code. Just make sure you note it so that way when I'm looking at your work, I know what's what. So that's your first attempt. After you've tried to answer the whole exam question with what's in your brain, I want you to do a second attempt at it. And this time I want you to use your notes and use your resources like Google, and try to answer the question with that help and that support. You might need to also correct some mistakes as well, because you might notice that the memory you have in your brain is incorrect to what is actually being asked. So this is really useful because it helps you identify misconceptions in your knowledge. It also helps you make a note of what you understand, but isn't in your long-term memory. Does that help? And I don't know why it's not letting me go further. Oh, that's annoying. Let me do... There we go. Now you can see it. Okay. The last attempt is known as your third attempt, and that one is when I want you guys to ask for help from your classmates and from me. This, again, is really helpful because it'll let you identify what you don't understand. So when it comes to the knowledge that you're gaining, there's 3 different situations. You either understand it or you don't understand it. And then if you do understand it, is it in your long-term memory or is it not in your long-term memory? And that is going to be really important when you guys study because you want to prioritize the things you don't know. So when you look back at these quizzes, the one that's in your third attempt color, that's the stuff you are struggling with the most and that deserves the most attention. So you want to study smart, not hard. So you want to use your time most effectively. I know a lot of people like to do what they're confident with first because then they feel really good about themselves. And I don't mind you guys doing that, but don't use that as your only strategy. Start with what's most difficult and then work your way backwards. If you already know it and it's already in your brain, you don't need to keep revising it because it's already in your long-term memory and you already understand it. So you want to use your time effectively. Study smart, not hard. It's not a matter of how many hours you put in, it's how many good quality time you put into it. Does that make sense? So use that strategy. So I know I see a lot of you guys have this really particular need to get everything done and get that little tick off. I noticed that with the organic people in particular, you're going through and doing all the questions and all the pages. I don't need you to do all the questions and I don't need you to do all the pages. Just do what you need to do until you understand it. Once you understand it, you can move on. Okay? Does that sound right? Okay? Fair? Because I want us to keep going on. I don't want you to see it as a tick box exercise. I want you to see it as, do I understand it exercise? Just trying to see what else I have for these points. Oh yeah, there we go. Same thing I was saying, study smart, not hard. It's not the amount of hours, and then prioritize. I've already talked about that. And then was there anything on this one? Yeah. Oh, that was just me reminding you guys. So I know the sun, earth, and moon people, you guys have gotten some exam questions. I want you to use this method. I forgot to type that up in my instructions, but do that. And then I know energy people, same thing. I've given you guys some exam questions. Use this method as well. So color code it. It's going to be really useful, again, when you go back and do your study. That way you know what you know and don't know, and what is in your memory and what isn't. Okay? You guys have a lot on your plates. I know that. And that's why it's really important that you learn to be efficient with your studying. Okay? Any questions? All right. If that's it, then I'm going to go on and give you guys your jobs for today.